The rain pounded on the closed windows of the tavern as the occasional crackling of thunder could be heard off in the distance. The dark, dense clouds blocked the numerous stars and the bright moon, which was supposedly at its waxing gibbous phase. Everyone already had dinner hours ago and were sleeping the night away in bed. However, a certain tiefling was still awake as he silently read his book in the dark, the lightning providing the only source of light whenever it struck the ground. He allowed a sigh to escape as he rested his chin on his hands, with his elbows propped on the bar table as he stole a glance at his surroundings. Of course, no one was awake or about. One of the downsides of not needing to sleep. No one to talk to or provide some sort of amusement to. Verico's tail stiffened, and he instantly straightened his back as he stared wide-eyed at the kitchen door. He could have sworn it came from the kitchen, but who would be awake at this hour? More importantly, how did he not notice before? Deciding to investigate, Verico closed his book and stuffed it in his bag before silently walking to the kitchen door. Hesitating, his hand hovered over the doorknob for a few seconds as he contemplated on whether to alert the others. But then again, that would give this stranger the chance to escape if he ran up the stairs to wake everyone else up. Guess he had no choice. The warlock slowly opened the door, cringing at how it squeaked like a whiny mouse as he scanned the kitchen. Readying a fire spell in his hand, his eyes darted left and right until he noticed the culprit. "Avack?" Verico asked, making his presence known to the monk. Avack turned around with his mouth full of meat that he almost reminded the tiefling of a chipmunk before he shook the image out of his head. Swallowing, the monk then graced his teammate with a smile as he waved to the clearly confused warlock.
Hey, Verico. What's up?
The tiefling snuffed the flame in his hand, no longer needing it. "What are you doing?" Verico interrogated as he pointed to the bone in Avack's hand, which was picked clean from any remaining meat that was on it.
I got hungry, so I decided to get a midnight snack. Sorry if I disturbed you. I accidentally knocked over a few pans.
Avack explained as he gestured to the floor. "I see," Verico stated as he eyed the various pots and pans now littered across the floor. "Aren't you full? We had a rather large meal for dinner." Avack shrugged.
Nah, I burnt it all off when I was training in my room.
"You were training?" Avack nodded.
Yep, I decided to do a few push-ups and stretches before bed. Why were you down here?
"I decided to do some light reading," Verico answered, instinctively patting his bag to make sure his book was still there, even though most of the time it was. "You should probably get some rest now. Tomorrow..." Both almost jumped out of their skin when they heard the door slam into the wall as they turned their heads to come face to face with a rather drenched-looking sheriff. The sheriff was panting heavily as he rested his hands on his knees, trying to catch his breath before meeting the very confused stares he was receiving.
There you guys are.
"Why were you looking for us?" Verico questioned.
"Because there's been a murder."
Sheriff explained as he regained his composure.
A murder?
Avack asked, but Verico had a different and probably more important question. "Who was murdered?" Verico interrogated as he took out a pen and a new journal, opening it to a fresh page and writing "Murder Mystery" on the top. The sheriff scratched his head as he tried to remember.
"I think it was the cabbage man, and..."
Cabbages?
Avack interrupted, already imagining all the good food that one could make with it and eat before Verico elbowed him in the side. "Do you know his full name?" Verico queried while he continued to write. The sheriff shook his head.
Nope. Everyone just calls him the cabbage man. He's the one who sells all his cabbages at that building over there, before it was destroyed when the dragon and stone giants came and wrecked the place.
"Did you already inspect the area?" Verico asked, making sure to keep a wary eye on Avack, who looked far too eager about this murder mystery. Or perhaps it was because food was mentioned. The sheriff shook his head once more.
Only saw the body. Didn't have time to inspect much. I thought it was more important to get you guys on the case.
Why us? It seems like a rather small murder mystery.
Verico pointed out.
Everyone is too scared to get out of their houses because they think it was the Sandpoint Devil.
I guess we'll wake the others up and meet you there?
Sounds like a plan. I'll try to do my own investigation while I wait.
After tipping his soaked hat, the sheriff strolled out of the kitchen and back outside into the pouring rain.
Looks like we have a mystery on our hands.
Verico declared as he placed the journal and pen back into his bag.
Can you wake up Thymus and Soleil? I can wake up the others.
Are you sure you don't need more help? I can wake one more person if you want.
Avack offered before throwing the bone away into the trash bin. Verico shook his head.
Trust me, it won't take me long to wake them up. Meet me back downstairs once you finish waking everyone up.
On it!
Avack exclaimed before running off, Verico close behind as they ascended the stairs. Avack knocked on Soleil's door while Verico slipped into Kiala's room.
Soleil, can I come in?
Avack asked.
Sure.
Avack barely heard the monk's voice, but shrugged, knowing he had her consent. Opening the door, he found Soleil sitting upright in bed, tightly gripping on the blanket as she winced at the sound of thunder. She looked wide awake, too, as if she hadn't fallen asleep yet.
Are you okay, Soleil?
Avack questioned as he moved closer to her bed.
Is the storm gone?
Soleil nervously asked.
I think it's going to rain all night.
Avack observed when the light from the lightning momentarily flooded into the room through the curtains.
Oh.
Soleil stuttered until realization hit her.
Wait, why are you here?
Someone's been murdered.
Avack stated, as if it was as simple as that.
What? As in someone's dead?
Soleil queried. Avack nodded.
Yep, and we're going to solve the mystery.
Why can't we wait till when the storm's over?
I'm not sure. I just know the sheriff guy came in and wanted all of us to help. Verico told me to wake you and Thymus up while he wakes up the others.
Though Soleil was still confused as to what exactly was going on, she nodded and loosened her hold on the blanket. Setting the blanket aside, she jumped right out of bed and blew out the candle on the table before nodding to Avack.
I'm ready. Let's go wake up Thymus.
Meanwhile, Verico was slowly walking over to Kiala's bed as he whispered,
Sha'karr! Kiala!
When he received no response, Verico sighed before deciding to wake up the paladin first. Walking over to the side of the bed, Verico started to gently shake Sha'karr.
Sha'karr? Wake up! Wake up!
The paladin grudgingly opened an eye and groaned when he noticed it was still dark out.
What is it, Verico?
Someone's been murdered.
Verico stated with a shrug.
What?
Sha'karr yelled, sitting upright in bed and now fully awake.
Why did you say that loudly?
Verico whispered as he noticed Kiala's eyes fluttering open. She sat up and yawned before raising a brow at Verico.
Verico? What are you doing in my room?
Someone's been murdered.
Verico repeated.
What?
Kiala shouted, earning a nod from the tiefling.
Like husband, like wife.
Verico thought with a sigh, until Sha'karr interrupted his thoughts.
Who was murdered? Did you finally snap and kill Irid?
No, I did not kill Irid, though that is quite tempting. No, need to get to the point.
Verico reminded himself as he recalled what previously happened downstairs.
The sheriff came in and reported that the guy selling cabbages was murdered. Don't know who did it, or why they did it, That's why he wants us to investigate. He suspects it's the Sandpoint Devil.
Oh. So, we can just turn in Shuka and call it a night.
Sha'karr concluded as he flopped back down in bed. Verico glared at the Dragonborn and started pulling on the paladin's arm to get him out of bed, even though it was a losing battle.
We are not turning in Shuka. Come on. I promised Avack we'll all meet downstairs.
Kiala playfully nudged Sha'karr.
Come on, Sha'karr. We're already awake anyways.
She then turned her attention back to Verico and gestured to the door.
Don't worry, I'll make sure he's awake and ready. We'll meet you downstairs.
Thanks, Kiala.
Verico thanked before exiting the room. Avack and Soleil walked to Thymus' room before Avack knocked on the door.
Thymus? You awake?
Avack asked as he continued knocking.
Wait. 5 more minutes.
They heard Thymus sleepily groan.
Should we let him sleep for a bit?
Soleil questioned. Avack shook his head before opening the door, much to Soleil's dismay. As the two walked into the Tabaxi's room, Avack noticed, from his peripheral vision, the bag of holding labeled snacks. Distracted and curious as to what snacks were in the bag, because apparently his midnight snack wasn't enough to fill his never-ending stomach, Avack decided to slink over and kneel down to peek inside the bag on the ground. To his disappointment, there was only a few rice balls left, but there was a lot of cheese crackers in the shape of fish that the monk had never tried before. With Soleil peeking over his shoulder, she stepped back when he grabbed one of the crackers and stood up, inspecting the new snack as he turned it over in his hand.
Hey, Thymus, can I eat these, please?
Avack asked the slumbering druid, who groaned again and turned on his side. Thymus reluctantly opened his eyes a smidge until they widened, noticing his precious snack in the monk's hands.
Okay, I'm up. And you can each try one.
Thymus answered as he stretched like a cat, a tired yawn managing to escape in the process. After all, if he told the two monks that they could eat as many as they want, his goldfish supply would be gone within minutes.
Thanks, Thymus!
Avack explained, popping the cracker into his mouth before handing one to Soleil.
Here you go, Soleil!
Oh, thank you.
Soleil thanked him as she took the snack and ate it.
Well, Thymus, this is good.
I'm glad you like it, but what's going on? Why is everyone awake? The sun isn't even up yet.
Thymus questioned as he put his hand out, in which Avack handed back the particular bag of holding.
Apparently someone's been murdered.
Soleil claimed, looking to Avack to explain the situation.
Yeah, the guy who sells cabbages is dead. So we're in charge of figuring out who did it.
Avack added.
We're supposed to meet Verico downstairs after this.
Thymus's ears slightly folded with concern, but nodded in understanding.
We should head downstairs then.
Simultaneously, Verico opened the door to Shuka's room, not bothering to knock as he released another sigh.
Shuka? Irid?
No response. Again. The two avians still seemed to be off in dreamland, and it was difficult to see their faces through all the feathers. It appeared that Irid had his arm and wing wrapped around Shuka, who also had an arm around the larger avian. They looked rather peaceful. Too bad he had to end it. Verico's eyes landed on the lute beside the bed, and a devilish grin appeared on his face as he stealthily walked over to grab said instrument. With Irid's instrument in hand, the tiefling made sure to stand right next to Irid before strumming a loud, discordant note, which instantly woke the two avians up from their slumber.
Good morning, lovebirds.
Verico greeted with a smirk, especially after noting the bewildered look on Irid's face when the bard's eyes found his instrument in the warlock's hands.
Verico, just why?
Shuka tiredly questioned, rubbing his eyes with a claw. And can you please give me back my instrument? Irid added, his worried eyes not leaving the instrument. This was definitely worse than Sha'karr taking his instrument.
Someone's been murdered.
Verico nonchalantly claimed with a shrug.
Verico, I swear if you killed someone.
Shuka started until the warlock shook his head.
Seriously? Why does everyone think I'm the murderer here?
Verico questioned.
You really want to know?
Irid asked.
Anyways, get ready and meet me downstairs because we're solving a murder mystery.
Verico concluded. The tiefling was about to walk out the door with the loot in hand until Shuka told him.
Verico, give Irid back his instrument.
With a sigh, Verico unwillingly handed the instrument back to the bard before exiting the room. As the warlock descended the stairs, he noted that everyone else was up and awake, already downstairs and waiting. Sha'karr was rubbing his arm, and Verico wondered if it was because of Kiala, and judging by the smirk on her face, she probably used force to convince the paladin to get out of bed and into his armor. The isolation squad was isolating themselves at the bar table, with Avack hungrily eyeing the bag of holding Thymus protectively held against his chest, likely to prevent angering the Dragonborn for the lack of food. Again, while Soleil stiffly sat at her seat, noticeably flinching every time the crackling sound of thunder resonated in the dark room.
Soleil, are you okay?
Verico asked, concern laced in his tone as he frowned.
Yeah, I'm okay. As long as this mystery doesn't take too long.
Soleil answered, stealing a glance at the window. She could barely see the lit streetlights from the rain, which continuously pounded against the windows and filled the otherwise silent atmosphere.
I'm sure it shouldn't take too long. It's not the worst murder mystery we've solved. We just need to inspect the area. That's all.
Verico explained, which caused the monk to look more nervous as she bit the lower half of her lip and eyed the window once more.
We're going out there? The storm's not even gone yet.
Soleil pointed out in hopes to convince the tiefling that they should all stay inside. Verico raised a brow at this.
Of course we're going out there. We can't solve a mystery if we don't investigate. Do you not like the rain?
Soleil's voice trailed off when she heard the sound of footsteps coming down the stairs.
Okay, what's the plan and how long is this going to take?
Irid interrupted as both he and Shuka descended the stairs.
We're going to investigate the area first, right?
Avack questioned, finally taking his attention off the bag of snacks, to which the tabaxi allowed a sigh of relief to escape.
Verico nodded.
Yep. And I guess we'll plan our next move after that.
Wait, what else do we know about this case?
Sha'karr wondered out loud as all eyes turned to him.
All we know is that it's some guy who sells cabbages that has been murdered. Who would kill someone for cabbages?
We woke up for this?
Irid exasperatedly remarked, and the bard was about to head back upstairs, if not for the fact that Shuka grabbed his arm and gave him a warning glare.
You didn't tell them?
Kiala asked. The tiefling shook his head.
I just told them that someone was murdered. They were taking a while to wake up.
So, this whole mystery is about this cabbage man who has apparently been found dead a few minutes ago? How come no one else is working on the case?
Shuka queried.
That's what I said, but then again, the sheriff and everyone else believes that it was the Sandpoint Devil. That's why they're concerned. You should be thankful I talked Sha'karr out of taking you into custody.
Verico pointed out before glancing at the surprised paladin, who was receiving quite the glare from the rogue.
Seriously, Sha'karr?
Shuka grumbled, crossing his arms as he waited for an answer.
Look, we're getting off topic here. Let's just head over to the crime scene.
Sha'karr decided as he opened the door and went out into the rain.
Changing the subject, huh?
Shuka muttered under his breath before everyone else followed the paladin into the pouring rain. One step outside and the party was already drenched and soaked. The cold rain trickled down their necks and dampened their clothes, which clung on their wet skin as they trudged on. It wasn't too difficult to see through the rain, but those with night vision helped lead the party through the dark, stormy night as they continued down the empty streets to their desired location. It only took the party a few minutes to arrive at the scene, noticing how the building was already rebuilt from their previous encounter with the stone giants and the dragon. The sheriff walked out of this building, and after recognizing that it was the party there, and not some random strangers, ambled over to them and gestured to the open door.
You guys can take a look for yourselves. I'm going to alert and report to the others to stay in their homes.
The sheriff informed before walking off into the distance. Thymus broke the silence as he nervously glanced at the door.
So, are we going inside?
We're gonna have to if we want to solve this mystery.
Shuka answered.
And if we want to go back to sleep without worrying that some mad murderer is on the loose.
Irid nodded. The bard playfully nudged the smaller avian beside him as he raised a brow at Sha'karr.
You gonna take the lead, I assume?
Of course.
Sha'karr agreed with a nod, placing his hand on his sword in case he needed to withdraw it at any moment. Peering over his shoulder to make sure no one else was around, Sha'karr took the lead as he went inside the building, everyone else following close behind. As they scanned the area, the paladin took out one of his torches to light the dark room for those without night vision. The place looked like an utter mess. Shelves were either hanging on their hinges and about to fall off any second, or were already on the floor, splintering into several large pieces of wood. The vegetables were scattered all across the ground, though there was still one basket still intact and holding several crisp green cabbages. The Dragonborn could have sworn he heard the monks sigh at the waste of food on the ground and made sure to keep a wary eye on them, in case they do decide to rob the place. Chairs were knocked down, and one table looked like it was almost perfectly split in half and laid broken on the ground. Almost at the same time, everyone looked down and found the victim behind the counter. The wooden planks beneath the body were stained crimson as a few open wounds continued to bleed. Though what the party noticed was not the few cuts here and there, but the numerous bruises that decorated the body head to toe.
Is he dead?
Avack asked as he took note of the victim's state.
I believe so.
Sha'karr muttered under his breath.
I'm gonna poke him.
What?
Sha'karr shouted, snapping his head to the monk with wide eyes.
To make sure he's dead!
I'm pretty sure he's dead.
I'm gonna make sure. Besides, I have a pointy stick.
I'll join you, Avack, because I also have a pointy stick.
Thymus voiced as he held out his staff. Sha'karr facepalmed and exasperatedly let his hand slide down his face as it took every bit of restraint in him to not strangle the two of them.
I've seen this before.
The Dragonborn thought to himself before clearing his throat.
Don't you two remember the last time you decided to poke bodies?
Oh, yeah! When we fought those werewolves! That was fun!
Avack exclaimed as he remembered the awesome fight, though Sha'karr definitely didn't share the same sentiment.
Come on, Thymus! Let's poke the body!
And so the party watched as the monk and the druid took out their staffs and slowly walked over to the lifeless body on the floor. Even though the cabbage man wasn't breathing at all and was bleeding on the ground, the two nodded at each other before poking the poor corpse.
Yep, he's dead.
Thymus informed, when the body didn't flinch or show any other signs of life.
Yeah, he's looking pretty dead, alright.
Avack added.
I swear. Want some random monster come out of the shadows like last time?
Sha'karr sighed as he recalled the last time something similar happened. As if on cue, the sound of thunder echoed in the room. but they all heard the sound of creaking floorboards from upstairs. Were they truly alone?
You all heard that, right?
Soleil asked as she scanned the dark room for a monster to attack them by surprise. Sha'karr drew his sword out, and everyone took a fighting stance.
Want me to check upstairs?
Avack offered, as the party stared at the stairs.
As long as you bring someone else. Soleil, can you accompany him?
Shuka replied as his eyes landed on Soleil.
Why don't you trust me? I can go alone.
Avack stated.
Because your first reaction was to poke a body.
Sha'karr loudly whispered, trying to keep his voice as quiet as possible, but then again, poking a body? Really?
I can go if you want.
Soleil said as she looked from Avack to Sha'karr and back at Avack.
You're going.
Sha'karr concluded as he gestured to the stairs. Avack shrugged and stealthily headed up the stairs, with Soleil close behind.
What are we going to do while they're gone?
Irid questioned once the two monks disappeared out of sight.
We're going to investigate instead of poking everything we see.
Sha'karr answered, specifically looking at Thymus, who nervously laughed before inching away from the body he'd just poked.
Sorry.
Thymus apologized, knowing full well that the paladin was likely more than a little annoyed at their antics.
Okay. How about this? Verico, you and I will investigate the body's wounds. Irid and Shuka will investigate the room for any more clues. Thymus can guard the front door in case the sheriff returns. And Kiala will stand by the stairs in case the two monks need assistance up there.
Sha'karr suggested, and everyone nodded in agreement and went to their respective positions. Verico took out his journal and pen before nodding to Sha'karr.
I'll write what clues we discover.
Well, I know one thing. The murderer is not the Sandpoint Devil.
Sha'karr hypothesized as he took a closer look at the wounds.
I agree. 1, there is no way the Sandpoint Devil could come in here without breaking the whole wall to enter, and from what I can see, only the furniture is messed up. 2, you dealt with Hell's Fire firsthand, and there are no burn wounds present whatsoever.
Verico observed as he stated, jotting their observations down.
Do you think the murderer is upstairs?
Sha'karr questioned.
Personally, I don't think so. The murderer will be quite stupid if they stayed at the crime scene, idly fidgeting with their hands as they wait to get caught. Maybe the noise we heard earlier was someone else who lives or works here and was hiding when this all happened.
Verico shrugged and gave a side glance to the Dragonborn as he continued to write.
Perhaps. But why did the murderer not go on a whole killing spree? Why him out of everyone in the village?
The tiefling shook his head.
That's why we're solving this murder mystery. We don't have all the answers to these questions until we find more clues. Heck, we don't even know his real name.
Speaking of clues, how's the investigation going over there?
Sha'karr called out to Irid and Shuka.
It's not going so well.
Shuka answered. As if on cue, one of the shelves' hinges loosened until the shelf fell off completely, loudly making contact with the wooden planks and almost giving the rogue a heart attack.
Well, we do know one thing.
Irid remarked as he opened one of the drawers.
Nothing seems to be stolen, so the murderer was probably not looking for something valuable.
Of course not. We're talking about some guy who sells cabbages.
Verico sarcastically sneered with an eye roll.
I think the only stuff valuable here are the copper pieces the man probably made from selling them.
Irid, hands to yourself.
Shuka warned, grabbing the larger avian's arm to prevent him from snagging a heavy bag of copper pieces.
Fine, if you insist.
Once Shuka nodded and started walking to the other side of the room, Irid took the bag and swiftly stuffed it in his pockets. To play innocent, he started to softly whistle a tune with his hands in his pockets as he followed his bird companion, though it felt like eyes were burning through his back, and he had no doubt that Verico was likely glaring at him. but the tiefling didn't mention anything as he returned his attention to his journal. He was safe. For now.
I found something!
Thymus shouted, and everyone turned their heads to the tabaxi as he pointed to one of the walls.
Wait. I thought you were guarding the entrance.
Sha'karr queried as he looked to the front door, and his jaw dropped.
Thymus!
Sha'karr growled.
Oh! I used the spell to enlarge and command this spider. He agreed to guard the entrance for us.
Thymus explained as he gestured to the large spider, which greeted them with a wave of a hairy leg.
Okay.
Sha'karr stared at the spider for a few more seconds before turning his attention back at the druid.
What did you find?
I found this.
Thymus pointed to the wall once more, and when the party came closer to inspect the wall, they noticed a strand of black hair stuck at the splinter.
The murderer must have black hair.
Verico jabbed his thumb in the direction of the dead body on the ground.
But the victim also has black hair.
Well, at least we know the murderer could also have black hair.
Thymus exclaimed.
There are a lot of people out there with black hair.
Sha'karr mumbled as he took the strand and carefully looked at it.
It's...
A loud thud interrupted Sha'karr, and Kiala worriedly glanced at the party.
That was from upstairs.
Kiala clarified before shouting in the direction of the staircase.
Avack! Soleil! Is everything okay up there?
The sound of glass shattering was even louder than the rain, and a few seconds following that, they heard an intense thump outside.
What are those two up to?
Shuka wondered out loud as they all ran outside to see what the commotion was. There on the ground was some random hooded figure laying sprawled out on the ground and trying to get up, but it seemed like Avack and Soleil were using him as a cushion to soften their fall, despite the fact that monks would have landed unharmed because featherfall does wonders.
We're so sorry.
Soleil apologized to the hooded figure, who only grunted as Soleil moved to stand up. Avack, on the other hand, pinned the poor person's arm behind their back to make sure they couldn't fight them or run away.
We found the murderer!
For the last time, I'm not the murderer!
The hooded figure shouted.
Can someone please explain what's going on?
Sha'karr asked, confusion written on his features as he raised a brow at the hooded figure.
Well, we were going upstairs.
Avack started, until Soleil added,
And then the thunder kind of scared me, so I accidentally yelped and gave away where we were.
Which got the attention of this guy, and he pointed a dagger at us.
Avack said as he glared at the hooded figure.
He told us to leave if we didn't want to get hurt.
Soleil explained.
But he was outnumbered 2-1, so we took him on. We both jumped on him and pinned him to the ground. But
He managed to escape and threw the dagger at the window, breaking it and trying to escape.
Soleil finished.
we were faster. We both grabbed a hold of him as he jumped out the window, and here we are.
Avack concluded with a grin.
So what were you doing on the crime scene?
Sha'karr queried the hooded figure.
I can't tell you.
The hooded figure answered.
Why can't you tell us?
Shuka asked.
The boss said so. That's all I can tell you.
The hooded figure firmly replied in hopes to end the conversation.
You know, if you won't answer our questions, we have to assume you're a suspect.
Sha'karr pointed out, gesturing his sword to the hooded figure to reveal that he was not playing around.
But I'm not the murderer!
That sounds like what a murderer would say.
Avack accused him, tightening his grip on the hooded figure's arm. Sha'karr took a few steps forward and lowered himself so he met the figure eye to eye.
We'll give you one more chance. What were you doing here?
The hooded figure only shook his head.
You can't get me to talk.
The paladin scoffed before he grinned, an idea forming in his head.
We'll see about that.
He taunted, though he had to admit, it surprised him that the suspect didn't even flinch. Straightening his back, Sha'karr turned around to face the rest of the party.
Let's take him back to the tavern for interrogation. Anyone have a rope?
Thymus nodded and took out his rope from his bag of holding before handing it over to the Dragonborn, who tightly wrapped the rope around the hooded figure. However, the hooded figure tried to fidget and escape, though Avack held a firm grip on him, and Soleil even held the suspect's other arm when he tried to grab his dagger. Not wanting their suspect to use the dagger to escape behind their backs, Soleil took the dagger, and Avack took the hooded figure's bag.
Here's his dagger.
Soleil handed the dagger to Sha'karr after he finished tying the suspect. Sha'karr took the dagger and inspected it in his hands. The dagger was the size of a knife, but the tip was stained with dried blood. Another clue.
Verico, take a look at this.
The paladin called out to the tiefling, who walked over and inspected the dagger. Writing the clue down, the warlock bit his lower lip in deep thought.
At least we have something. Though something seems off. Maybe when we get more answers from him, this will hopefully make more sense.
Then we better get a move on. Avack and Soleil, make sure to keep a firm grip on him. We don't want him running off. Kiala, can I talk to you for a second?
Sha'karr asked, looking at the other Dragonborn in the party, who nodded in understanding. As the party made their return trip to the tavern, Sha'karr and Kiala lingered behind the group as the former grabbed her hand and gave it a squeeze.
Can you do me a favor? I think I know how we can get him to talk.
Kiala squeezed his hand back.
Of course. What's your plan?
Sha'karr leaned in and whispered something in her ear, and her eyes widened in surprise.
Do you think he'll be okay with it?
It's the only plan I've got.
Sha'karr quietly admitted. He then nodded his head towards Soleil.
You'll tell her the plan?
Kiala nodded.
I'll tell her. But if he questions why we're doing this, I'm blaming it on you.
I'll take my chance.
She softly smiled and gave him a quick kiss on the cheek before she walked over to Soleil and whispered the plan into her ear. Soleil also had a similar surprised expression on her face, but from what Sha'karr could see, she looked excited and agreed to the plan. If the wink Kiala gave him wasn't evidence enough. Soon enough, they arrived back at the tavern, soaking wet and leaving puddles everywhere, which they would have to clean up later. Kiala gestured to the stairs, and Soleil nodded before letting go of the hooded figure and walking over to the female Dragonborn.
Hey, Verico?
Soleil called out. Verico paused from rummaging through his bag for his journal and looked up at the monk.
Yes? What is it?
Can you come with us for a second? We need your help with something.
The tiefling tilted his head and stared skeptically at the two of them. Peering over his shoulder, he noted that Avack had already guided the suspect to one of the bar stools and jumped over the counter, leaving Irid and Shuka behind to make sure the hooded figure didn't make any attempts of escaping. Sha'karr was already mentioning something about Avack playing the good cop, and Thymus was in the corner watching the whole scene play out. It did look like they didn't need him for a while.
Sure. Lead the way.
Oh, how he didn't know how much he'll regret his decision as the three of them ascended the staircase. The tavern seemed perfect for an interrogation scene. They lit a few candles, but the room was still ominously dark. The brewing storm outside and the occasional clap of thunder emphasized the mood and filled the otherwise silent room. Sha'karr's eyes laid on the door, but Thymus intervened.
Don't worry, the spider followed us and is guarding the entrance. You'll have to get past him if he wants to escape.
The Dragonborn nodded in approval and turned to the monk.
Avack, start the interrogation, since you were the one who encountered him at the crime scene.
Sha'karr started.
Oh, okay.
Avack shrugged and leaned on the counter.
You have been a really bad dummy.
The monk accused, wagging a finger at the very confused hooded figure.
I beg your pardon?
the suspect replied. Sha'karr facepalmed in the background and wondered if the monk had done any interrogation in his life. With a sigh, he pushed Avack to the side and took his place in front of the suspect.
Now I want to make myself very clear. You will not be leaving this room until you answer our questions, and I won't hesitate taking any means necessary to get you to talk.
Sha'karr growled in hopes to intimidate him. To the paladin's dismay, the hooded figure only shrugged.
Go ahead. At least I'm out of the rain. Besides, didn't I also make myself clear when I simply stated that I'm not the murderer?
Yet you refuse to answer any other question we throw at you.
Sha'karr pointed out.
And you refuse to believe me when I tell you I'm not the murderer!
This isn't going anywhere.
Sha'karr thought as he gritted his teeth.
Hopefully this plan works and Verico agrees to it.
Speaking of the tiefling, he was seated in front of the vanity in Kiala's room as he eyed what Kiala was holding. Soleil had left to get something from his room, which Verico was very suspicious about and hoped she wasn't taking a peek at his next novel he was working on. Let's just say he didn't want to ruin what innocence she had left. But that's beside the point. His biggest worry was the gentle smile on Kiala's face as she got a brush and started putting weird powder on his face.
What are you doing?
Verico asked as Kiala continued to put the stuff on his face.
Getting you ready for the interrogation.
The Dragonborn answered as she licked a clawed finger to clean something off his cheek.
But I am ready.
No, this will help.
Is this?
Makeup? Yes.
Verico immediately tried jumping out of the chair, but Kiala was faster and grabbed his arm, setting the tiefling back down in the chair.
Why are you putting makeup on me?
I think you can figure this out on your own.
I found it!
Soleil exclaimed as she entered the room, holding one of Verico's older clothing he didn't wear too often anymore.
What were you doing in my closet?
Verico questioned, growing more and more suspicious with every second that ticked by. To him, the girls were acting quite weird. Ignoring his question, the monk turned to Kiala.
I also bought some short heels I had from my room that should fit him.
Heels?
Verico shouted before both girls hushed him.
Shh! Keep it down.
Kiala whispered.
You're dressing me up as a girl, aren't you?
Verico realized, and he wanted to dig himself into a hole and hide there forever when both girls nodded.
Ooh, it's like playing dress up. I never got to do this before. I don't have a little sister.
Soleil happily admitted with the biggest smile on her face.
Before you start glaring at us and planning some sort of elaborate plan of revenge.
Kiala started when she noticed how the tiefling's tail flicked around with irritation.
This was Sha'karr's plan. He thinks you can.
Seduce him?
Verico finished cringing at the idea when Kiala nodded with confirmation. Verico rapidly shook his head.
No way. I'm not seducing him.
How about I give you something in return if you do this?
Kiala offered. Though the offer was quite tempting, the warlock shook his head once more.
I don't want anything.
Oh, I know one thing you want, and I'll let you borrow it so you can do it.
Verico raised a brow at this.
Really? What do you think I want?
Kiala whispered the idea into his ear, and a devilish grin grew on Verico's face after the Dragonborn leaned back and allowed him to process her offer.
Okay, I'll do it.
Verico agreed with a nod.
So I was thinking of making this a two-piece.
Soleil thought out loud as she grabbed a pair of scissors, looking at the item of clothing she took from Verico's room up and down.
I'll definitely cut off the sleeves so you can show your shoulders.
Verico's grin faltered and wished he could take the offer back, but there's no turning back now. Meanwhile, back downstairs, Sha'karr was growing more and more annoyed. They tried so many things to get him to talk. Thymus brought out his big spider friend to intimidate their suspect, to no success. Avack challenged the hooded figure to a spar, only to receive a no. And Irid started strumming the most out-of-tune song he's ever heard in his life just to annoy the supposed murderer. But nothing seemed to work.
How about you explain this?
Avack asked as he tossed a bag of holding he took from the suspect onto the table.
Wait, you had this the whole time and thought it was a good idea to tell us now?
Shuka questioned with surprise. Earning a nod from the monk, the rogue sighed before snatching the bag from the table and dumping its contents out. What came out were a few heavy bags of gold and another dagger, random pieces of cloth, and gloves that Shuka recognized.
Are these gloves of thievery?
So, you're a thief.
Avack accused.
Were you trying to steal something from the crime scene?
Sha'karr interrogated. The suspect only shrugged.
If only you knew.
The Dragonborn slammed his fist on the table, and lightning started to form in his mouth before he allowed it to dissipate.
Fine. Then let's see who's under that little hood of yours.
Without warning, Irid took off the hood, and Sha'karr brought the torch right in front of the suspect's face so they could have a good look. The man had rugged features and long matted black hair that reached to his shoulders. He had a small scar on his cheek, close to his dark brown eyes.
You're not from Sandpoint, are you?
Shuka queried.
What if I'm from here and you just have never seen me before?
The man snapped back.
Always answering our questions with questions, I see.
Sha'karr noted. Thymus gasped before pointing to the man's head.
He has black hair, just like the strand of hair I found downstairs.
Well, it looks like the clues are starting to piece together, and they're all pointing to you. So, are you finally ready to talk now?
Sha'karr declared with a smirk.
I'll never tell you anything!
The suspect shouted, which only made Sha'karr's grin grow wider.
We'll see about that. You see, we were only stalling for your real interrogation, and the person who will be interrogating you is already here.
Sha'karr pointed out as he gestured to the staircase, only for his jaw to drop in surprise. Everyone turned their heads and had a similar expression of surprise and shock, from their jaws dropping to the ground to wide eyes the size of dinner plates. Even Thymus accidentally dropped his bowl of goldfish, to which his ears folded with disappointment as his snack laid scattered across the hardwood flooring. Verico stood at the top of the staircase and took a deep breath before slowly descending the stairs, making sure to hold the railing so he didn't plummet to the ground, and keeping a calm expression on his face. Seriously, how does Soleil fight in heels? As he walked down the stairs, the rest of the party got to see the rest of his transformation, as the girls watched upstairs well out of sight. His hair was braided and swept into a bun, and the makeup on his face was there, but subtle. Kiala wanted him to look natural, so she only added a bit of blush, eyeshadow, and mascara for his eyelashes. The last makeup item Verico had never heard of, but went with it anyway. After all, he didn't really have a choice, but the clothes made him feel very subconscious about this whole idea. Soleil had altered his outfit into a two-piece, just like she said, and she had changed the top to a crop top with a thin strand attached and wrapped around his neck to hold it in place. There were no sleeves whatsoever, and the tiefling wished he had his cape to hide his shoulders and his hood to hide his face in. He had puffy pants on and heels that were only an inch, but it was a bit much in Verico's opinion. The warlock especially didn't enjoy how the outfit revealed his feminine curves, and how the makeup made him look more like a girl than before. Kiala found some random bracelets in her drawer and adorned them on his wrists, and even allowed the tiefling to wear a thin veil to cover the lower portions of his face. Soleil even sprayed some of her perfume on Verico, to which he was quite thankful that the veil covered his blushing cheeks. Noting what the girls told him earlier, The warlock mentally sighed before taking out the string holding his braid in place and ran his hand through his hair to undo the braid. To everyone downstairs, this seemed to have been playing in slow motion as Verico shook his head, his long hair falling down from its updo as soft curls.
Wait, who's the new chick? She's kinda hot.
Irid whispered to Shuka as Verico reached the last step. Shuka had to hold in his laughter before whispering back.
That chick you just called hot is Verico.
Irid's eyes widened, and the feathers around his cheeks grew puffier.
Oh no.
The larger avian had hoped that the tiefling did not hear his embarrassing comment, but alas, the latter heard all right. In fact, once it came out of his beak, Verico immediately snapped his head in the bard's direction and gave him a death glare that could have killed him on the spot. The warlock did the "I have my eyes on you" gesture to the flustered and rather guilty-looking avian that seemed to slightly convey the message, "You better not sleep tonight if you don't want to roll disadvantage."
Out.
Was all Verico demanded, and everyone headed to the kitchen except for Shuka, who moved back to his position behind the suspect.
I'll make sure he doesn't try anything.
Shuka whispered into Verico's ear as he walked to his position. Verico took another deep breath before returning to his previous calm, emotionless expression as he took the dagger on the table and effortlessly cut the rope around the suspect with one swish of the blade. Shuka's eyes widened, but he decided not to question the tiefling. However, he did notice how the suspect was also surprised that he was set free. That is, until he turned around and realized that Shuka was still there with his arms folded and giving him a glare that likely meant that he shouldn't try anything stupid. While this was happening, Verico turned his back to the suspect and grabbed one of the cups. He filled the cup with ale, all the way to the brim of the cup, and slid it to the stunned suspect across the bar table. Realizing the suspect wasn't going to say anything, Verico leaned on the counter and smiled at him.
You looked thirsty.
Was all the tiefling said as he waited for the suspect to engage in the conversation.
Thanks.
The suspect muttered as he took the cup and took a good swig out of it.
Are you okay?
Verico asked, tilting his head as he propped his elbows on the bar table, resting his chin on his hands. The suspect only nodded.
You don't seem fine. Your cheeks are red, and I heard you and the boys were having quite the conversation a few minutes ago. Yet you've only uttered one word since I came down here.
Verico observed.
Would you like me to check your temperature?
The suspect shook his head. Verico mentally sighed before straightening his back and using a finger to lift the man's chin so they were eye to eye.
I only want to talk, that's all. I'm sorry if they were threatening you or...
You look really pretty.
The suspect interrupted, and Verico was taken aback before he quickly regained his composure. The tiefling plastered on a fake smile to hide how badly he was inwardly grimacing and wanting this to end already.
Thank you. And what's your name, handsome?
He could already taste the bile in his mouth even before he said it.
Dex.
The suspect answered as he took another sip from the cup.
That's a really nice name. Must mean you have quite the dexterity.
Verico complimented.
Of course I have dexterity. I'm a thief.
The suspect blurted out. Realizing what he said, he quickly covered his mouth with his hands.
Oh, you're a thief? That must mean you've seen quite a lot of jewels. They must be beautiful.
Dex nodded as he lifted the cup to his lips, wiping his face with his sleeve. He replied,
Yes, but nothing compared to your beauty.
Is this guy serious? This is the worst flirting I've ever experienced in my life. Even Irid can do better than this.
Verico thought before clearing his throat.
You're so sweet, but I would love to hear a story about one of your adventures. Must be nice exploring different places and finding all these different trinkets here and there.
Indeed. In fact, that's why I decided to come here.
Really? Do tell.
Verico encouraged, sadly knowing that he needed to distract the guy as much as possible. The tiefling jumped onto the table and sat down, letting his legs dangle on the side as he pretended to look really interested in what the thief had to say.
My boss said there was something special here in Sandpoint. A stone, he told me. But he didn't tell me much else. He only informed me that I would know once I found it. As I was roaming the streets, I saw all the commotion at that there building with the sheriff running out in panic. I knew there must have been something valuable in there. So I jumped to the rooftops and leaped into the upstairs part of the building. I was only there for a few minutes, peering into drawers and stuff, but all I found was this pouch of gold pieces, which wasn't too bad of a find. However, your meddling friends over in the kitchen accused me as a murderer for some reason, and literally used me as a cushion when we fell out the window. Now here we are.
Dex explained before taking another swig of the ale.
Wow, that's some story. But what's with the blood on the other dagger?
Verico interrogated as he played with his hair, because he doubted twirling the dagger in his fingers would help seduce the guy.
I still don't get why I had to seduce him. Kiala and Soleil could have done it.
Verico thought, mentally sighing.
I was hunting a boar for dinner. Look, I know I'm a thief, but I like to avoid killing people on the job. It makes things less messy.
Verico raised a brow when he heard boar, but he immediately returned to his calm expression.
It's good to know you're not a murderer, but I'm sorry you couldn't find what you were looking for.
Don't worry. I found a better treasure.
Verico had no time to react when Dex unexpectedly grabbed his hand and pulled him closer, to the point that their noses almost touched. Shuka rested his hands on the dagger and waited to see what Verico would do.
You're too kind, but it's getting awfully late and I must retire to bed soon and...
Verico was interrupted when Dex used his other hand to tear the veil off of the tiefling's face.
My, why cover such a beautiful face?
Dex asked, and Verico could smell the liquor from his breath.
He's already drunk? He didn't even finish the first cup!
Verico thought as he tried to push the man away, but he was stronger.
At least let me give you a kiss goodnight.
Dex pressed as he leaned in closer, puckering his lips. Verico was really freaking out now, and his tail was flicking around madly in distress until an idea formed in his mind. His frown turning into a fake smile, the warlock leaned in and whispered into the man's ear.
Good night.
Before punching him in the face with all the strength he could muster. Surprised, Dex fell off the chair and fell unconscious on the ground with a bloody nose, right next to a bewildered and shocked Shuka, who inched away from the man.
Phew, that was a close one. Are you okay, Verico?
Shuka asked as he moved toward his friend and gave him a side hug.
I'm fine. I'm going to change,
Verico muttered as he gently pushed Shuka to go up the stairs.
Wait, Verico!
Shuka called out as he grabbed the tiefling's hand. The warlock looked at Shuka's claw that gently wrapped around his hand, unlike that man, before raising a brow at the bird.
Yes?
I'm sorry. You did a good job, though. At least we know he's not the murderer.
Verico's eyes drifted to the unconscious man on the floor before returning his attention back to Shuka.
Thanks. But now we're back at square one.
Shuka gently squeezed Verico's hand.
Don't say that. We made progress. I'll let you change back to your normal clothes now. I can tell the others what we learned. Okay?
The tiefling gave a reassuring nod in reply, and a small smile appeared on his face as Shuka let him go. With a wave, he walked up the steps to his room, and was likely going to be questioned by the girls on what happened, while Shuka lingered there for a few seconds until he decided Verico was going to be all right. The rogue turned to the kitchen door and opened it, of course after stepping over the body on the floor, to reveal the eavesdropping party. Apparently Avack and Thymus were leaning on the door to hear the conversation until Shuka opened the door and they were knocked to the ground. Sha'karr was pacing back and forth until Shuka arrived, and Irid was leaning against the wall, lightly plucking the strings on his lute here and there out of boredom.
Were you guys eavesdropping?
Shuka interrogated as he looked between Thymus and Avack. Thymus shook his head, though he had a rather guilty expression on his face.
No, of course we weren't.
But sadly, Avack didn't get the gist.
How did you know?
Anyways, how did it go? They only told us snippets of the conversation, and from what they did tell us, the suspect was flirting.
Sha'karr asked, curious as to what actually happened out there.
Yeah, the suspect sounded drunk, even from here.
Irid added, putting his lute away. Shuka released a sigh before recalling the event.
To make this short, the suspect isn't the murderer. He was just here to steal something and...
And you left him alone in a tavern?
Sha'karr shouted, about to run and make sure the hooded figure hadn't escaped until Shuka stepped in front of the door with his arms out.
He's unconscious on the ground. It's fine. Verico knocked him out.
Shuka clarified. The larger avian eyed the kitchen door behind his bird companion.
Huh. I'm surprised Verico didn't burn him or something.
Irid admitted. The rogue shrugged at this.
Me too. But he handled it quite well. However...
Shuka glanced at the Dragonborn.
Was it you who planned this?
Sha'karr nodded.
It was the only idea I had. And we got answers in the end. Hopefully Verico isn't too mad at me.
Shuka snorted before looking to Irid.
You know what? I think Verico is more mad at you than Sha'karr.
Yep, I'm dead.
Irid mumbled with a pained expression, already imagining the many different ways the tiefling could use to torture him.
I guess we both owe him an apology.
Sha'karr realized as he noticed the absence of said tiefling.
Wait, where's Verico? Is he okay?
He's fine. Just changing upstairs.
Shuka reassured.
So, what are we going to do in the meantime? We don't have any other leads.
Thymus questioned the rest of the party.
Shouldn't we inspect the area again? Maybe we missed something.
Avack added. Sha'karr shook his head.
No, I think we should take a break and get some rest. We can continue in the morning.
So... want to spar with me?
Avack started as he finally stood up from the ground.
Ugh, I just said we should take a break.
Sha'karr repeated, not liking the eager look in the monk's eyes.
Isn't sparring relaxing, though?
Avack asked.
Good night, everyone.
Sha'karr exclaimed as he exited the kitchen, and after stopping in his tracks to find the unconscious body on the floor, shook his head and ascended the stairs. Everyone else watched the Dragonborn leave before they shrugged and followed the paladin up the stairs and to their respective rooms. Though the thunderstorm still persisted, everyone, even Soleil, was able to get some sleep. What a terrible mistake they made, sleeping when a murderer was on the loose. Don't worry, they'll figure it out. Eventually. Speaking of a murderer on the loose, Soleil heard her door open and close shut, and she grudgingly rubbed the sleepiness out of her eyes as she sat up. The monk was about to take the candle beside her bed to see who it was, but the inconvenient wind from the storm quickly blew it out at the worst time possible.
Hello? Who's there?
Soleil timidly asked as she got out of bed and took a fighting stance. However, she couldn't see anything, the cons of not having dark vision. All she saw was darkness, and it was freaking her out.
I know you're in here.
She tried to taunt, but all she heard was how fast her heart was beating and pounding in her chest. Soleil attempted to throw a punch in front of her, but only made contact with her wooden closet.
Oops, I hope Kiala won't be mad.
Soleil muttered to herself, knowing that said Dragonborn gave her this room when they arrived in Sandpoint. Deciding it was no use to keep wandering in the dark, Soleil thought it was best to find the door and exit the room. She stretched her arms out and started feeling for whatever it was in front of her in hopes that it was a door.
Okay, where's the...
Soleil shouted when she got punched in the stomach and landed on her bed from the force.
Who are you?
Soleil managed to grunt as she slowly stood up, clutching her stomach as she winced a bit. No answer. But once she stood up, the mysterious person kicked her off her feet, allowing her to fall on the ground.
Are you the murderer? Someone please, help!
Soleil was rudely interrupted when she barely dodged a punch to the face that could have easily knocked her out. Knowing she had no choice, her timid expression changed to a more serious one as she cracked her knuckles.
You messed with the wrong monk.
Soleil called out before throwing a punch in front of her, only to hit air. All Soleil could do was put her arms in front of her and try to block whatever was thrown at her, or perhaps duck every now and then. Luckily, she managed to dodge and reflect most of the murderer's attacks, though she could feel the bruises already forming along her body. She only had a few cuts here and there, and she could feel the warm crimson liquid trickle down her arms and bottom lip as she wiped the blood off her lip. Soleil's first punch missed, but her roundhouse kick apparently managed to land on the suspect, throwing the latter back a foot or two. As a flurry of blows, Soleil missed her first kick, but she successfully punched the mysterious person so hard that the latter hit the door and opened it upon contact, flooding the room with light from the hallway.
Soleil, what's going on?
Verico worriedly asked, running up the stairs as everyone else exited their rooms to quizzically stare at Soleil and the wounds across her skin.
I found the murderer! They tried to kill me!
Soleil answered as she pointed to the collapsed form on the ground, but something looked awfully familiar about them. In fact, she knew this person.
Avack?
Avack's the murderer?
Thymus questioned, followed by a yawn.
Wait, that doesn't make sense.
Verico pointed out as he moved through the crowd to kneel down next to Avack.
Hey, Avack, you okay?
The tiefling asked as he gently wiped the monk's hair away from his face. The monk's eyes were closed as he started to snore, his chest slowly rising and falling to the rhythm of sleep.
He's asleep?
He fought me when he was sleeping?
Soleil asked as she eyed the monk, apparently sleeping on the ground.
I guess so?
Verico answered with a shrug before deciding to shake the monk awake.
Avack? Avack, wake up!
The monk's eyes fluttered open as Verico took a step back to give the former some room. Avack sat up and stretched a bit, noticing how his arms felt a bit sore, until he noticed the weird stares he was receiving from the rest of the party.
What's going on? And why am I on the floor?
We could ask the same thing to you, Avack. Why did you try to kill Soleil?
Sha'karr interrogated. Avack tilted his head in confusion.
What? I don't remember trying to kill Soleil. I just remember going to bed and dreaming about sparring with Shuka.
Me? Why me?
Shuka asked, wondering why it was him and not the Dragonborn. Avack shrugged.
Because you're strong, I think. I can't control dreams, they just happen.
Wait, I think I know what's going on now.
Verico realized as he stood up and started pacing back and forth.
Think about it. Avack was dreaming about sparring, and he ended up fighting Soleil. I believe you not only sleepwalk, but you sleep fight too. That's why you probably don't remember.
But you were the one who first saw Avack, right? Did he really kill that man?
Sha'karr queried.
Yeah, that's the part that's getting to me. When I found you in the kitchen, Avack, you were dry. If you went outside in the rain, you would have been soaking wet.
Verico recalled as he continued to pace.
Ah, so that's why I was wet.
Avack admitted, which stopped Verico in his tracks.
But when I found you, you were...
Before I went down to the kitchen, I woke up in my room, all wet in those pajamas you guys gave me. I thought I was doing push-ups and lost count. So I assumed it was sweat. That's why I changed to my normal clothes and went downstairs because I felt hungry.
Hold up, pause.
Shnun said as she quizzically looked to the DM across the table.
How did Verico not notice him sneaking back into the tavern?
That's because I rolled a nat 20 for stealth.
Nate exclaimed with a grin.
I want to flip the table. I want to flip the table!
Wolf shouted as he rolled his d20 to see what he would have gotten if he needed to make that check.
He got a nat 1.
Seriously? Nate, give me back my rolls!
Nate shook his head.
Nope, you can have your rolls.
Out of anger, Wolf chucked his d20 as far away from him as possible, hearing it satisfyingly make contact with the wall and landing on the ground. Realizing he needed it, though, the wolf heaved a sigh before pushing his chair back, standing up, and walking to retrieve said dice. To his dismay, it landed on a nat 20. Anyways, Vince started as they could hear Wolf cursing under his breath. What happened was that Avack was dreaming about sparring, so in his slumber, he managed to sneak out of the tavern and ended up at the Cabbage Man's place. Though this is rather unfortunate, he also rolled pretty high on his attacks and ended up killing the man. Since the sparring session ended in his dream at around the same time, he then headed back to the tavern and, again, succeeded on his stealth check and ended up in his room. Verico didn't hear any of this, probably because he was engrossed in his book.
So he was the murderer?
Eagle asked as he munched away on his goldfish. Vince nodded.
Nate, why do you have to fight everyone?
SPD64 questioned with a sigh. Nate looked hurt as he frowned at the question.
Hey, it's not me, it's my character. There's a difference.
Back to the story, Vince pointed out as he read over his notes. Now, it's time to let the characters process and react to the information so we can call this a day. After all, it's been quite a long story.
So, you sleep fight?
Sha'karr asked, interrupting the uneasy silence that fell upon them. Avack shrugged once more.
I guess? Oh, maybe that's why my master looked mad when I woke up and he had a black eye.
Yeah, probably.
Verico agreed.
I'll never be able to sleep peacefully again.
Sha'karr thought to himself, mentally sighing that it was more than possible that the monk would one day challenge him to spar in his slumber.
What are we going to do now?
Irid queried, voicing the question that everyone was thinking of.
Do we have to turn him in?
Soleil added with a frown.
I know he did kill someone and he did hurt me, but it's not entirely his fault.
Well, if you think about it, we're all murderers. We kill bad guys all the time on our adventures.
Verico observed, and everyone grew quiet once more for a few seconds, but it felt like hours when they realized the tiefling wasn't wrong.
What if we turn in that thief downstairs?
Thymus wondered out loud, remembering that they tied the suspect up again in the kitchen.
We're going to lie to the authorities?
Soleil asked.
Isn't that wrong?
Technically, he did break into the guy's house to steal something.
Shuka replied.
You know what? I have a better idea.
Sha'karr declared as he looked to the rogue in particular.
Shuka, you still have the head of that Sandpoint Devil, right?
Shuka nodded.
It's still in my bag of holding, in case people need a reminder that I'm not the Sandpoint Devil.
Since everyone believes it was the Sandpoint Devil, why not show them the head to prove that we did slay the beast?
Sha'karr explained, remembering that Verico told him everyone believed it was the Sandpoint Devil.
But what if someone else inspects the place and realizes that it wasn't the Sandpoint Devil?
Kiala questioned with concern.
Then we'll turn in that thief downstairs as a bonus.
Verico answered, his tone thick with disdain and disgust as he tried to push the memory to the very back of his mind.
So, you're not going to arrest me?
Avack asked for clarification after listening to all this planning and scheming to basically lie and cover up his crime. Sha'karr shook his head.
No, you're a part of this party, and it'll be hard to complete missions if everyone thinks you're a criminal. But, is there any way to prevent you from sleep fighting?
Avack contemplated this before shaking his head.
I don't know. I didn't even know I was fighting people in my sleep until now.
I guess I can try using a sleeping spell. Or I can always make sure he doesn't start fighting others at night.
Verico suggested.
But you need to sleep too.
Soleil pointed out as she rubbed a sore part of her arm, likely from when Avack was fighting her in his sleep.
I don't need to sleep, but if I tell her, how would I explain when she allowed me to sleep in her tent? I would sound like a creep.
Verico thought to himself before shaking his head.
Don't worry, I'll
We
be
can take
fine.
shifts if you want. You look after him for a few hours, then I can help.
Soleil offered, raising her hand to volunteer herself.
She's so pure. Should I tell her or...
Verico's thoughts were interrupted when Shuka intervened.
Soleil, I think you need to rest tonight after everything that happened today. I can help Verico.
The avian then winked to the surprised tiefling to silently hint that he was covering for him, to which the latter was very thankful for. Sha'karr nodded in agreement.
Shuka makes a good point. Verico or Thymus can heal you while me and Shuka bring the thief to the sheriff.
With that, the paladin and rogue left the group and went downstairs to grab the suspect, of course, after stopping by Shuka's room to grab the Sandpoint Devil's head. Verico healed the few bruises that scattered Avack's form, while Thymus helped heal Soleil's wounds. After making sure both monks were healed and well, Irid claimed that he was exhausted and went back to his room to get some much-needed sleep, to which Thymus and Kiala followed suit after lingering in the hallway for a bit. Verico agreed to stay in Avack's room for the rest of the night to make sure there were no more incidents tonight. As Verico slipped into Avack's room to find a good place to sit and read, Avack gently grabbed Soleil's hand before she went to her room.
I'm sorry for hurting you.
Avack apologized, and though he loved to spar, he looked rather guilty as he frowned.
Oh, don't worry, I'm fine now. Good night.
Soleil reassured with a timid smile. Satisfied that he at least apologized, Avack let her go and watched as she went into her room and closed the door shut. With a nod, the monk then walked to his own room and settled into bed. Of course, after saying goodnight to the tiefling, who was sitting against the wall with his book in hand. As the tiefling read in silence, well, unless you count the rain that was slowly dying down, Verico did not forget Kiala's end of the deal as he waited for the two to arrive back at the tavern. Once his ears twitched at the sound of the front door opening, he waited for another hour for the two to go to bed and sleep before a sly grin grew on his face. Making sure the monk was fast asleep, Verico quietly opened the door and slipped into Kiala's room. Grabbing what he needed from the vanity, the warlock moved to Sha'karr's side of the bed, but froze when he heard the creaking sound of the bed as Kiala moved to a more comfortable position. Opening an eye, she met the tiefling's surprised stare and winked before going back to sleep. Releasing a sigh of relief, unaware that he was holding his breath till now, Verico opened the palette and took one of the brushes into his hand. If Sha'karr was going to make him dress up as a girl, might as well return the favor. And so Verico gave the Dragonborn a makeover of a lifetime, from eyeshadow to lipstick in the most brightest color possible, all while the Dragonborn slept the night away. But the tiefling definitely didn't forget about Irid either. Quietly entering Irid's room next, surprisingly, he slept in his own room this time instead of with Shuka. He noticed how the avian made such a great mistake. He warned the bard that he was in trouble, but there he was, peacefully snoring.
Shuka's gonna get a kick out of this.
Verico thought to himself as he smirked, his tail holding the bag of makeup as he started with the blush. After a few minutes passed by of adding quite the layer of makeup on the avian's feathers, Verico took a step back and nodded in approval. It could even be his best work yet. Oh, how the morning will be interesting, all right. Pleased with his revenge, Verico returned the makeup back to its rightful place on Kiala's vanity before entering Avack's room once more. Yes, he could have gone farther and given the monk a makeover or two, but the tiefling decided against it for reasons. Yeah, let's leave it at that. Verico lowered himself back to the ground and leaned his back against the wall. Retrieving his book from his bag, he opened it to a new page and found a folded piece of paper that was definitely not there before. Curious, Verico unfolded the note and silently read it to himself. Dear Verico, I have finished writing the draft for Part 2 that you asked for. You may read and edit if you please. However, I would like to address my concerns for the next story. I guess I shouldn't spoil anything, but are you sure you want to do this to Irid and Shuka? No, wait. I know you'll do this to Irid, but what about Shuka? Anyways, attached is the copy of Part 2, and I can't wait to see how it turns out. From someone in the void. Knowing full well what the note was talking about, he found a packet of papers attached to the note and read the title to himself, a grin on his face as he grabbed a pen and started editing.
Wait, you can't end a murder mystery like that.
Shh! Avack's sleeping. You don't want him to wake up.
He's knocked out cold. He won't hear this.
Isn't this a good place to end the story?
We gotta end this strong. Perhaps a cliffhanger.
Isn't ending the story with a note a cliffhanger? No one knows what we're talking about.
Why don't we end this mystery with a mystery?
The story is already long as it is.
Please? I'm sure you can think of something that's short but leaves the reader thinking.
I guess there's one thing I learned in cybersecurity that could help.
I don't know what that is.
Yeah, that's true, but it'll be a simple thing to decipher here. I'll end the story like this, and no more interruptions. Verico looked away from the fourth wall to turn the note over, realizing that he missed a secret message on the back. However, it all looked like a bunch of random letters on the page, but perhaps you, the reader, can figure this out. On the back of the note, it reads, Hint. BGB WMS PCYJJW RFGLI YJKMQR JMTC GQ MLJW YZMSR QMJTYAI ? Key. Page number. The end.